Hey, it's me again, Debbie, and wanted to go a different direction this time. I had originally anticipated doing some things. I was going to do a two-parter of what actually led to me doing this video series, and that is the question that have been asked many times: has Ménière's affected your life, and if so, how? I decided to make that a two-parter, but I'm not going to do that to start with. I thought maybe it would be best if I would first instead tell you a little bit more about me and my roller coaster, the one that I'm on. It might give you a better idea when we get into the next two segments of why it's impacted my life and where it all began. So let's see. I first presented with symptoms. It was the end of October, beginning of November, somewhere around Halloween 2004. Wasn't keeping my journal then, of course, for this, because it had just started. But I thought I had an inner ear infection. I woke up to go to work. I was working a midnight shift at a local television station, and I was excessively dizzy. It's like everything is just spinning. Somehow I got myself together. I got in my van and I went to work. It was midnight. I went in and did changeover with the master control operator, the senior MCO. I was overnight MCO, and at that point I wasn't saying anything. I didn't give any indication anything was wrong. Went about my work and getting everything taken care of. I went in and, like I always did, I made my cup of tea. I had this big cup that I used to make a cup of hot tea in, and drink throughout the night, or until it's gone. And I brought it back in and was in the chair, and I would scooch my chair over, take a sip of tea. I'd do what I needed to do, and then all of a sudden I needed to vomit. And I'm not one to vomit. I have never been one to vomit. In fact, years ago when I had the stomach flu, I just felt really horrible. Went to the doctor, and he told me I had the stomach flu, and he actually had to give me something to make me vomit, because vomiting is a way that your body will purge things within it that are impurities that don't belong there. Fever is another way. I've never really carried a fever, so I didn't do all these things. My body didn't do these things naturally that a body would do to cleanse itself. So anyway, that night I started vomiting. I brought the wastebasket over and kept it by the chair, and it was like every time I'd take a sip of my tea and I'd take care of something, I'd have to vomit. It was all night long doing this, and in the morning I went and I tied up the trash from the wastebasket when I was trying to find somebody who could come and take me home, but I couldn't reach my neighbor. He could have taken the bus out and driven my car with me in it, but I couldn't reach him. So finally they were kicking me out of the station. It's like, you're sick, you need to go home, because at that point I didn't know if I had the flu or an inner ear infection or what. So My neighbors, were on standby with the phone. I called and said, hey, look, this is what's going on. I'm attempting to drive home. If I'm not there at such and such a time, then you'll know something happened. I made it home, and I came up and I went to bed, and was still kind of, out of it the next day. I'm thinking it was a weekend, so I didn't have to go into work the next day, and I pretty much slept it off. And everyone I talked to said, it sounds like you have an inner ear infection. Well, I had just started full-time. I'd been part-time. I just started full-time. Insurance hadn't kicked in. So I didn't go to the doctor. Couldn't afford to. And some friends said, well, it sounds like you've got an inner ear infection. They've had them before. I never had. So they said, what you need is antibiotics and Sudafed. And one of those people, whenever she travels out of country, she always takes a prescription of antibiotics with her just in case something happens. Well, she had just gone back in country and didn't use them while she was away, so she brought me her prescription of antibiotics. So I started taking them. I took the Sudafed, and I got through. When I was through with all the vertigo and everything, I was left with, it was in my left ear. I had constant tinnitus and hearing. My hearing was damaged. It was a little loss of hearing there. Significant enough for me to notice because I've always had very acute hearing, but not like severe the way it is now. Anyway, I thought, well, that's what I get for self-medicating with an inner ear infection. I'll have to live with this. And I went about my life. In fact, that Hanukkah was the last holiday I ever really celebrated and enjoyed. Come February 2005, my insurance had kicked in, but I woke up again, vertigo, and it was like it's starting all over again. So when I got off work the next morning, I went straight to my doctor's walk-in clinic, and the PA who treated me in the clinic happened to be a friend of mine that I used to sing with. I was like, look, Andrew, you're going to tell me it's an inner ear infection and send me to an ENT. So he did everything he needed to do, and he went and talked to the doctor, comes back, says, yes, you have an inner ear infection, you're going to see an ENT. I went to see the ENT, and he ran his tests, CT, all of that. Andrew had run the x-rays and stuff, so the ENT had all of that. And the doctor comes back in and he says, you have never had an inner ear infection in your life. I'm like, so what's wrong? Because I've been a swimmer for a long time, I would get swimmer's ear, but that's not an inner ear infection. It's totally different. So we talked, and he said, you're going to be going for a bunch of tests. They had to start working on figuring out what was wrong with me. My primary doctor was still trying to get me in to see a neurologist. I didn't get in to see him until June. The first thing that had to be done is I have had orthostatic hypotension most of my life. It's the feeling you get when you stand up real quickly. I have that every time I stand up. In fact, it's why I've always craved salt. So the first thing we had to do really was formally diagnose the orthostatic hypotension. So I went to see a cardiologist and had a tilt table test. And he made me pass out at 60 degrees. We didn't make it through the rest of the test. When they moved it up to 30, I was, real woozy, almost lost it, but didn't. Then they moved it up to 60, and I lost it. In fact, 5 people plus the computer tried to find my blood pressure and couldn't. It had dropped so low. So the cardiologist said, you need to start eating a salt shaker a day. And I was like, yay, permission. So since I'd been fasting, I went down to get lunch, and the first thing I did was grab a salt shaker and just started pouring it on. Yeah, the wizard decided to nix that one the following December. But anyway, I went in, had 4-hour glucose tolerance tests, all kinds of other blood work, MRIs, and everything else to rule out everything, or to see if it happened to be something. Finally got into the neurologist. He did his EEGs and all of that stuff. He was the first person to mention Meniere's to me, and I had never heard of it before. I wrote it down. He told me how to spell it, and when I got to the computer, I looked it up, and I was reading what other people were saying, other patients with Meniere's were saying. I'm like, I could have written these. It seemed that they were saying exactly what I was feeling, except when I would say it to doctors and nurses and other people, they'd look at me like I was crazy. And here other people were going through the same thing. So that was like June of 2005 that the term Meniere's disease was first mentioned to me. September, when I'd gone in to see the ENT again, I mentioned it to him. I showed him the sites that I'd been looking at, and he said they were legitimate sites. He knew that I was a researcher and a writer, and wasn't one to go to the undocumented stuff, the stuff that's just far out. I do look for legitimate things, and I do a lot of extra research, looking for what's real and verifying. Anyway, I mentioned it to him, and he said, well, I've been leaning in that direction for a while, but I wasn't going to formally diagnose it until January. He went ahead and formally diagnosed it as Meniere's disease in September. Sadly, when it came time with the insurance and everything again, I was going to get disability, but I couldn't because I'd already been formally diagnosed. But I will get into that within the next two video segments of how Meniere's has affected my life. But anyway, I went through a sleep study as well to see if there was anything happening in my sleep that could possibly be triggering the Meniere's. Didn't find anything. Then in December, I was sent to see a neurootologist, who is a neurologist which specializes in diseases of the inner ear. They are the people you really want to see if you have Meniere's disease. They're the ones who know what you need them to know. ENTs are good, neurologists are good, primary doctors are good, but an odo, as we call them, they're the best. They're the ones you want to see. And the first thing he tells me is no more salt. And the first thing I say to him after that is, are you crazy? Telling me no more salt is like telling the majority of my friends no more chocolate. And I had to learn to have a happy medium. It's never going to be perfect. A lot of people with Meniere's disease, especially if it's mild, they can control it with diet. Especially, limiting the sodium intake. I can't limit mine that far, or the orthostatic hypotension will cause me to fall. So it's like, for one, I'm supposed to eat a lot of salt. For the other, I'm not supposed to eat any salt. I've never been one to do anything the easy way. He scheduled me for endolymphatic sac decompression on my left ear the following February. The odo did. or as I call him, the wizard. I had that and had about 2.5 months with no symptoms. It came back with a vengeance in June of 2006. I became bilateral. Since then, I have gone through the gamut of the medications that I can take. Excuse me. We put grommets in my ears the middle of October 2008. First time they fell out in June of 2009. I added on the trigger of weather, and things got worse. And have gone downhill since. I had the second endolymphatic sac decompression June of 2016. So just over 10 years after the first one. But that is pretty much where I am now. I have exhausted all of my options for treatment. Because of a lot of drug allergies, I can't take the other things that they have. I cannot do the injections in my ears. The last grommets they put in were supposed to last 8 years. They didn't even last 6 months. My eardrums were too weak, so we can no longer use those either. So this is where I am for now, and the next 2 segments will be talking about exactly how Ménière's has affected my life. And for now, I bid all y'all a spin-free day.